absolutely not a snowball's chance in hell that Ukraine is going to lose, as in the classic sense, against Russia. Russia they're just not up to the job. This is not the big scary army that we've been training to fight since the early 50s. They're a shadow of their former self.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And this time we are joined by former British Army officer Simon Woodiwiss. Simon was an infantry officer before working around the world as a security specialist for large infrastructure companies. He's now based in Ukraine as director of Objective Ukraine, a British company that handles business development and special projects. Simon, good to see you on Frontline again. Thanks for your time.
Hi, Kate. Yeah, number 4. Let's do this.
Yeah, you're joining us from Kyiv, and the ceasefire negotiations led by Donald Trump's team have been nothing short of volatile, unpredictable, and met consistently by demands from Russia and cooperation from Ukraine. This could take months, couldn't it? How is it all going down there?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. I think the locals are perplexed, to say the least. What's going on with the little man in Moscow is no change, situation no change. And as far as Trump is concerned, yeah, I mean, God knows what's going on there in La La Land right now. But it's a very, very strange situation, and the locals are doing a good job at getting their head around it.
And Simon, according to a survey by the Kyiv International Institute of Sociology this week, 73% of Ukrainians believe Donald Trump is bad for Ukraine. Is there any belief there that he might genuinely snap, lose patience with President Putin, and actually double down in his support for Ukraine at some stage?
No, I don't think so. I think he's either stunningly naive or colluding. That's my opinion. And as I said last time, I mean, everybody's got good and bad points. Trump has got good points. That pot is obviously diminishing, I think, at the moment. When he said things like, when he said things like Ukrainians don't have any cards to play, I mean, he's made it very clear recently that he's not playing with a full deck. Maybe, he just doesn't seem to have got a good handle on the situation over here. As I said, he either hasn't got a good handle on what's going on over here, or he's playing dumb. There's a very strong chance that there's option B, of course, because we've seen this guy before in action. But as far as the locals are concerned, they're struggling to deal with this individual. I mean, he keeps talking about coming up with a peace plan with Russia. As I said last time, and probably the time before that, peace deals without Ukraine are not peace deals. Okay, military efforts without Ukraine are not as they should be.
And how has it been in Kyiv this week in terms of, is it quite calm at the moment? How is life?
Yeah, it's pretty calm. I mean, a couple of weeks, 2 weeks before this week, there were air raids or air alerts across the country, including Kyiv, which has got particularly good air defence. But there's never enough, of course, pretty much every night. So it has been a lot calmer over the last few days. And
do you put that down to anything in particular in terms of negotiations or not?
Yeah, I think it probably is down to that a little bit. I mean, there's still air alerts going on, and the drones keep coming in, but maybe not as much as I must admit. I haven't kept my eye on it for the last 2 days, but up until about 3 or 4 days ago, yeah, they were coming in most nights, and I think this might be down to maybe negotiations. Who knows?
And Simon, as the diplomacy lurches forward, the situation on the battlefield, it continues to deteriorate. There is no let-up in the fighting, but for relatively small gains. Is that how you see it?
Yes. So, when people talk about there being very little action or very little activity or movement on the front line, that's not for want of the enemy trying. Okay, the Russians are pushing forward as much as they can in many, many places, if not all along the front. The reason why there's very little gain on their part is because of the heroic efforts of the Ukrainian defence forces.
And there's been a lot of attention given to the way drones have transformed the battlefield in this war. As a former infantry soldier yourself, you see limitations in this, don't you? Can you just talk us through that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't have drones when I was in the army. I left the army a long time ago, 20 plus years ago. I mean, we had big drones in the sky that were just starting to come in. But nowadays, of course, people have got things that can fit in the palm of your hand. And what the Ukrainians have shown the world very clearly is how adept they are at using what they can get their hands on. And in this particular case, we're talking about FPV drones or suicide drones or kamikaze drones, whatever you want to call them. And they account for far more enemy losses than any other munition, as far as I know. So yeah, we can learn a lot from the Ukrainians, but it's not really news anymore. That I don't think.
Yeah, but they can't replace infantry soldiers, though, in your view.
No, you can't. I mean, I'm biased, but it's a fact. There's only one thing that can take and hold key ground, and that's infantry. You can't capture ground. You can't recapture ground with drones.
And how good is the current training of infantry soldiers in Ukraine? Can you tell us about the how much, the how good, and the how it could be better?
As far as I know, they've recently increased basic infantry training up to 1.5 months. It's not nearly long enough, of course. They need to be doing a lot more infantry. The courses need to be a lot longer. They need to be more consistent because there's lots of different bodies within the armed forces of Ukraine that does infantry training. There needs to be a lot more time on the range. Okay, every soldier needs to leave training, I believe, with a marksmanship qualification. There's far too many Beirut salutes and people holding their weapons above trenches and firing away like that. I appreciate it's scary. I've been in them myself, but you need to be able to drop your targets with 1 or 2 shots wherever possible. And they're not going to be learning how to do this when they only spend literally a few hours on the range with each training course. So it needs to be longer, more consistent, a lot more time on the range, a lot more financial support that's dedicated to training programs inside Ukraine. So instead of just giving money to the AFU and expecting that, or to the MOD and expecting, or letting them decide what it's used on, obviously it's their country and their war, I think organisations outside the country should give dedicated resources, financial resources, to training programs and make sure the money is spent on those training programs.
And what kind of a difference do you think the best trained infantry soldiers could actually make? Because it's widely accepted this war won't actually ultimately be won on the battlefield, right?
Well, I mean, I think that war should be won on the battlefield. Wars are stopped outside the battlefield with agreements, etc., but they can be won on the battlefield, of course. There's not enough infantry. Everybody wants to be a drone operator. There are good reasons for that. It's a lot safer. And they are a lot more kinetic. They're a lot more kinetic because there's more of them doing that sort of thing than the infantry. So the Ukrainians, sometimes they get faced with like a company minus of enemy troops, say 50 plus guys attacking a position that might only have a section. So we're talking 6 to 8 people in them because of casualties, or they just don't have the manpower to send forward, or they've been caught short in a particular position, which is rare with the Ukrainians because they generally know everything that's going on the battlefield. But there just needs to be a lot more infantry in frontline trenches. The more you have, the safer it can be, ish. Okay, obviously you get strength with numbers, but the reason why it looks so dire in these infantry companies is because there are so few of them. There needs to be a lot more infantry, and they will be able to take the fight to the enemy instead of just defending against advances using electronic measures and drones, etc.
And how much damage did the brief stoppage of US military aid and the suspension of intelligence sharing do to Ukraine? And has it fully recovered from any damage that has been done?
I think that the effect was played up a little bit, maybe. So I know certainly about a year ago, SBU, that's Security Service of Ukraine, and they have direct action teams, they were making direct requests to the Brits for target packs. I'm not giving anything away there. We all know what everybody's doing in this country now, and if we don't, and when people haven't been paying attention properly. So the security services were asking the Brits for information to help them trip the enemy in depth, so including inside Russia, and because the Americans were not keen to pass that on. The Biden administration did a lot of great things. Not nearly as bad as Trump makes out. And for some strange reason, all that man seems to do is talk about how bad things were in the past. He's already in power now. I think he needs to move on from that. But the Biden administration could have done a lot more. Could have done a lot more to support this country. And they weren't providing as much intelligence to trip the enemy in depth as maybe people might think. The Brits were giving possibly as much, if not more. So I'm not sure how much of an effect the pause in intelligence actually had on the battlefield. And the same goes for the materiel, so military equipment, munitions, etc. That's what materiel means for some people, if people don't know. Ukraine has got, the pause had gone on for longer, then it would have been a more profound effect. But Ukraine had built up stockpiles, okay, and it's those stockpiles that were being eaten into. But ammunition was getting to the front line. It may be there might have been a few instances where things were not as effectively used as they could have been because of intelligence, blah blah blah, but restrictions. But on the whole, I think that it might have been blown out of all proportion. As I said, if it had gone on for longer, then it would have had a more profound effect.
And is there any kind of planning that Ukraine and its Department of Defense and its military does need to do, though, in light of what did happen, to limit any damage that might be caused by another withdrawal of US support?
I don't know. I can't really comment on what's happening in Ukrainian high command. I'm sure they've got things together.
President Zelensky is reported to have outlined his requests of any military forces deployed to Ukraine in the event of a peace agreement. The possibilities, according to Politico, include ground troops, air power to patrol Ukraine's skies, or sending military vessels to monitor the Black Sea. How realistic are the options, or even thinking of them at this stage?
Well, I can't remember the name of the convention, but or the agreement. But military vessels can't go into the Black Sea whilst there's hostilities. The Montreux Agreement. That's it. So that's pie in the sky talking about that, really. And as far as air defence is concerned, or rather air superiority, at most, I think, certainly for the initial phase, is going to be there's maybe coverage over Lviv, and that would be covering logistical hubs. So they'd basically be moving logistical hubs from Poland into Ukraine, possibly, providing that with air cover. And that's, I suppose that would help, but it's not going to be a significant increase. It's more of a political message, I think.
And President Macron has said France and the UK are driving an initiative for a reassurance force to back up any eventual peace deal. How plausible is that?
Manu says a lot, doesn't he? He's all bouche and not much pantaloons, I'm afraid to say. But he's certainly improving his game, and the French have been sending more stuff. They've just recently agreed another $2 billion dollars worth, or €2 billion of aid, but yeah, there needs to be a lot more action from the French, and less bouche. And as far as sending troops out here, there are very few countries that are actually going to be willing to send troops out here. The Brits, obviously, the French talk about it. Some of the particularly strong countries that we see in Northern Europe have got more skin in the game potentially, so they might be interested. Not the Baltic states, because they've got to look after their own borders. But I'm not sure how close we are to getting troops on the ground over here. I don't think that we should be sending people to fight here. I don't think we should be sending people, and we're not going to be sending people out here as peacekeepers without a ceasefire. By definition, and if we have NATO member troops on the ground over here, then that's one of the main things that Putin has been talking about not wanting since the word go. He hasn't changed his maximalist demands. One of those is no NATO membership. And another one is a reduction in the military. If we start reinforcing that military with our own, and that's essentially what we will be doing by having troops on the ground in whatever capacity they're here as, then that's two things on two things near the top of his list.
So a detailed meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing is due to take place in Kyiv tomorrow. We're talking on Thursday. What will military planners be working on right now?
I'm not really sure what they'll be working on right now. I know some of the things they should be considering. Obviously, they should be deciding where to put operating bases, logistical nodes. They need to obviously be thinking about how to dominate the electromagnetic spectrum, as we might do in an operation if it was our war. Obviously, a lot of attention needs to be given to protecting troops that are sent over here, with force protection. And certainly at the moment, there's a lot of talk about lasers, direct energy weapons being used to protect against drones. Other direct defences, such as the Israeli trophy system, things like that, we just don't see those on Western vehicles in the numbers that they should be. So, force protection needs to be number one consideration. If we're sending guys and girls to help this country, putting our boots on the ground, the number one priority should be how we're going to protect those people. And the material as well, our equipment. And as I said, we can learn a lot from the Ukrainians as far as drone warfare is concerned. And right now, we're behind the curve on that. So looking after our men and women, looking after our material. Oh, there's another error alert there. Apparently there was one on. I didn't know that. So logistical hubs, rules of engagement. That's another key one. There's going to be a lot of false flag operations conducted by the enemy. There's going to be a lot of skirmishing, people losing their temper, for want of a better phrase, along the front line. That could obviously spin over or boil over and affect peacekeeping forces further back. So rules of engagement is going to be a key consideration. Scary CBRN, or NBC as we used to call it, so CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear, I think, or nuclear, biological and chemical as it was in my day. So preparing for risks such as that, there's going to be a lot of time spent planning against risks and risk mitigation efforts. So, yeah.
Of course, Simon, as we said a little earlier, there is no imminent ceasefire or peace at the moment. So all of this is kind of like theoretical. Is there a danger here of too much focus in general of what foreign troops might or can do and too little on just building up Ukraine's armed forces?
100%. Yeah, the main effort should still be lying with training and arming the Ukrainians in Ukraine, I believe. Britain and other countries have done fantastic work outside. So Operation Interflex, and within Interflex, you've got Scorpius back in the UK. 25,000 Ukrainians trained between 2015 and the start of the main invasion. 50 to 60,000 trained by Britain and allies in Britain since about July 2022. Fantastic efforts. Very expensive, and also uses up a lot of land that we should be using to train back home. So all of that, I think, needs to be coming to Ukraine. There's a lot of Brits here. Everyone knows this. There's a lot of Brits here, far more than any other country, doing some fantastic work advising the Ukrainians on how to improve their armed forces. The Ukrainians love advice when it comes with money and equipment. So they'll say thank you, and they'll listen to you, and they'll nod, and they'll be grateful, and they will listen, and they will be grateful, and they will soak up a lot of the advice. But the main effort but the reason they're doing that is because they know what comes with that is financial and military support. If you don't have combat experience in this country, then teaching people in this country, either in it or outside it, back in the UK on Interflex, how to clear a trench, it's a bit cheeky, for want of a better phrase. The Ukrainians are grateful, and they'll bite their lip. But I know from top to bottom, from general down to private soldier, and I know a lot in that bracket, they think it's a bit of a joke that people back in the UK are telling them how to fight a war when these guys have never fired a shot in anger in most cases. We need to move the training to this country, and we need to use foreign volunteers with the combat experience in this country and Ukrainian veterans to deliver the training. It's a no-brainer.
It's a very interesting concept. And just on another point, as we await any agreement on the latest proposed minerals deal by the US to Ukraine, take into consideration your experience in supporting businesses in Ukraine. What is good foreign investment for Ukraine, and what is bad?
Maybe I misunderstood the question really, but bad investment is just handing money over and letting them get on with it. I think we need to bring and a lot of companies in the West are still keeping Ukraine at arm's length. So I set up my company to support foreign organisations, mainly British, in their efforts to support Ukraine, to get on with rebuilding this country and to support the Ukrainians before the shooting stopped, which I knew 2 years ago was going to be a long time away. I'm still not convinced it's going to be anytime soon. So I think what a lot of companies are still doing is that they're using in-country partners, and that's a way of de-risking against all the historic issues this country has had. I understand that, but companies need to deploy forward. Okay, they need to get their own, well, not boots on the ground, their own churches on the ground, or whatever shoes they're wearing these days. They need to get their shoes on the ground and get dirty themselves, and not just employ Ukrainian companies to do it. They need to come over here, show presence, fly their own company colours, and directly support them in Ukraine instead of just using partners, etc. I think that's the way forward.
And what do you think when Donald Trump sort of uses the mineral deal and dangles it as a carrot, as being in some way improving security and offering security guarantees by default to Ukraine?
You're going to have to bleep this out. I mean, to quote General Mattis, very experienced 4-star US Marine Corps general, the man's a moron. The fattest Oompa Loompa in the chocolate factory doesn't have his game together. Using that deal to get what he wants, and instead of directly supporting his country as much as he should, it's just not cool. It's not good behaviour. He's doing the same thing in other places. He chucks these threats around. He's a narcissist. He loves the attention. I mean, I'm convinced that there's a lot of good things in that man that he can still do. He's got a lot of good intentions, and he can do a lot of good things. But saying what he says about Greenland, saying what he says about Mexico, not Mexico, but Canada, and saying what he says about this mineral deal, it's almost like some sort of gangster territory. It's almost like some sort of protection racket, really, except without the protection. So it's not favourable. it's talking. He's talking about Ukrainians like they're not in the room, and I'm afraid to say they're not in the room when it comes to him. So that mineral deal is just it's just a joke. I mean, you can probably tell from my frustration here. And I'm a foreigner. You can imagine what these people think about this thing. I mean, sometimes I think Zelensky should just do a deal with the Europeans and then tell Mr. Trump to foxtrot Oscar.
Interestingly, Vladimir Putin has ordered the largest conscription drive in years to recruit 160,000 men between the ages of 18 and 30 by the 15th of July. That's up from 150,000 last year. This isn't a country preparing for peace, is it?
It's not. But I mean, judging by the Russian performance on the battlefield and the way Ukrainians deal with them, that's going to have one major effect, and that's going to be on the Graves Registration Department and the Russian MOD. All he's doing is providing more figure 11 targets for the Ukrainians to drop. The Ukrainians will just stack them up almost as quickly as they have done before, as long as they get the ammunition. But as far as an actual effect on the battlefield is concerned, as long as we keep getting the bullets and bombs to these people, and it is a lot better now than it has been in the past, then it's not going to have a massive effect. Now, the guys on the front line will probably have a different opinion. I'm sat here in Kyiv in a nice, comfy room, but as far as the tactical ability of the Russians are concerned, it's just going to be more targets to drop. I really can't see the Russians being able to push forward anywhere. The Ukrainians will fight tooth and nail, as they have done throughout this conflict, to protect their land. And the Russians are going to have a pretty hard job, even with increased numbers and moving forward.
And if you take a step back right now, Simon, at this moment, how confident are you that the country where you set up your business, where you live, has a future as a sovereign nation?
100% confident. There's absolutely no way Russia is going to defeat Ukraine. Not a chance in hell. I'm not convinced that Ukraine is going to get all the land back unless they retrain their army. So not retrain it, if they increase the training, increase the mobilization, and if they get more military support from us. But there's absolutely not a snowball's chance in hell that Ukraine is going to lose, as in the classic sense, against Russia. Russia they're just not up to the job. This is not the big scary army that we've been training to fight since the early 50s. They're a shadow of their former self. They've got nukes. That's a bad thing. Their navy's a joke. They've got a few. Their destroyers. Their new destroyers are basically frigates. Their new frigates are basically corvettes. They're allegedly planning to launch an aircraft carrier at some point in the future. They're relaunching the so-called battle cruiser of the Kirov class. It's been in dock for 30 years. And they're kitting it out allegedly to fire hypersonic missiles. Not very hypersonic in most cases. So this is the sort of stuff that the Russians are doing now. They're running out of tanks. They send their troops forward, on golf buggies, in cars, on motorbikes, on foot, and they just get attritted left, right, and Chelsea by the locals. I don't think the Russians got a chance of taking over this country.
Simon Woodiwiss, great to speak to you. Thank you for your time.
And thank you. Slava Ukraini.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.